So the hardest periods, they say, are when your kids are toddlers and then teens. We needed some new kinds of tools in our toolbox to deal with the teen years because it's challenging. We make choices and our life changes because of them dramatically. I would say, I definitely had to give up some things, but I gained so much.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this. We met at the Howard County Community Fair, and I was drawn to your energy. Of course, they put you right in the center, so the universe didn't want me to miss you. And then Noble also gravitated to your table.
Yes, he was adorable. I loved the little craft activity we did.
So I want to know, tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. So I am a mom of two, and I am now a parent educator as well as a couple educator. I actually went to UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I got an undergrad in psychology. Then I moved to California in '97, and in 2000, I'd done a lot of community work. I'd worked on housing issues, homelessness, in the law field, doing fundraising. And so in 2000, I decided I'm going to do what I think comes naturally to me, which is to go study psychology. So I entered a doctorate program out there in California. I got about 3/4 of the way through it, and then I'd gotten married to my husband and we had our first child. There was a point where I realized I really wanted to spend more time with him, and it was actually less expensive for me to stay at home. So I took a leave of absence thinking I would go back in a few years. But then we had our second child. By the time I wanted to go back, it was about 10 years later. And in that program, they would only honor about 9 credits. So there was no way I could do that. So meanwhile, I had been raising our kids, super involved with doing that, a lot of volunteer work, a lot of community work, always worked with parent educators, always made sure that I attended whatever parenting workshops I could or access support, or sent my husband to access the workshops that were being offered, which he didn't always appreciate, but usually after the fact he appreciated them. I ended up getting a master's of science in education instead, 10 years after I had left the program. And that was an important degree because it really helped me to understand children with learning differences who are also very bright. We ended up moving back to Maryland about 5 years ago, and I thought I was going to get involved with education here. I did end up getting involved in a volunteer capacity through the PTSA and at our kids' high school, plus the county level PTSA, which is called PTAC, which is a great organization. And I did parent education at the high school level, but also helped to coordinate a group that provided county-wide parent education. So to any parents of high school students in the county, they could access free parent education programs. So I loved that work, and we had teens at the time. We needed some new kinds of tools in our toolbox to deal with the teen years because it's challenging. I ended up taking some positive discipline courses, started to really learn those tools, which completely helped us and really helped to turn around some struggles that we were having. So I was certified in public discipline in 2022 to be a parent educator. And then the following year, I got certified in it's called Keeping the Joy in Relationship, which is all about supporting couples and partners. So a parent educator is a person who works with parents to provide them tools and information on strategies that are known to be effective in working with their kids, improving their relationships with their kids, getting more cooperation from their kids, learning how to set limits with their kids, all the struggles that parents have in raising kids. A parent educator can be there to support your journey. Positive discipline is a particular model of parent education. It was founded by a woman named Jane Nelson. She's written several books. Out of her work grew an organization called the Positive Discipline Association, and they provide training to parents as well as information on where you can access parent educators yourself if you need support. And that her work, Positive Discipline, grew out of teachings and the psychology of Alfred Adler, who goes back to the 1930s. So it's very pro-child. He was one of the original founding psychologists. You know, there's Freud, Jung, and Adler. He came out of Vienna. He eventually transplanted to America, and his information has always been remarkably effective in helping both parents and teachers. Out of him, a gentleman named Dreikers interpreted a lot of his work in the 60s and wrote a book called Children the Challenge. And Jane Nelson, the mother of Positive Discipline, based a lot of her work on Children the Challenge by Dreikers. So it's kind of a lineage of practices and thinking around raising children. So MAP Wisdom stands for Marriage and Parenting Wisdom. And I really loved the acronym because we all need a map for that journey, right? So, and I want to also emphasize that it's also partnerships. You know, it's partners raising kids, and also co-parenting. You know, so that happens in life, right? We're not always able to work it out with our partners. So co-parenting is a very important piece of raising children well. So MAP Wisdom is a practice that is here to support parents, both with parent education, so practices, understandings, capacities, tools in your toolbox, and also MAP Wisdom supports partnership and marriage, so couple skills. So same thing, practices, understandings, capacities to really help strengthen the partnership bonds. So that's what MAP Wisdom is about. So there really are a lot of tools in positive discipline. There's several ways that it is done in MAP Wisdom. There's a drop-in chat group for parents who want to either sort of start learning about it. It's kind of low commitment. It's anyone can drop in anytime. It's $10 to drop in, very affordable.
How often?
That is weekly on Tuesdays at noon Eastern time, and it's online, and it's 25 minutes. So it's a quick drop in, and if people want to stick around for a 5-minute mindfulness grounding exercise at the end, you can, because that's such a big piece of being in relationship, is being able to kind of ground ourselves. And there's also one on Thursdays that's for couples, same time, noon. It's $10 to pop in. There's a longer course, which is 6 weeks. It's a group course online, and that's parents can join that. You're learning a lot of skills in that. The group environment is excellent because you're seeing what other parents are doing. You're learning from their successes. You're learning from their mistakes. You're better able to understand your own mistakes and your own successes. And then finally, there's the private consultation. There's, you know, sort of private education, but then there's also coaching, and they're not exactly the same. So I do both, and I'm, you know, there to work with parents both on the parenting, also the couple support, because so much of being able to keep this whole project afloat is making sure that the co-executors are working together. I mean, I don't know what the research is on this, but I believe that kids are basically a risk factor for divorce because it is so difficult raising kids. There are so many possible points of conflict. And, you know, it just, when you have kids, all the pressures are amplified dramatically. Like if you're in a relationship with a person and it's going well, you may or may not be married, whatever, but you know, you don't have all those additional stressors that are added when you have children. It's much easier to maintain a relationship when it's just two people. You add those kids and it's a whole new game. It's a whole new experience. So, I mean, I think that it's quite common, that people have kids and it will expose every weakness you have in your relationship. Inevitably, being in relationship forces us to grow, no matter what, whether you have kids or not, whether you have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, whether you're married. Being in relationship forces us to grow emotionally. We have to, just by the nature of learning how to be with somebody else, learning how to be ourselves while we're with somebody else, learning how to adjust, learning how to accommodate, learning how to compromise, learning how to be assertive when we need to, hold our feet to the floor firm in what we need. So it's hard doing that as an individual with someone else. It ups the challenge when we're in relationship with a significant other, and you add children. And again, now all of these demands are amplified. So it is an opportunity when you have children and a partner. It provides us with an opportunity to do deep emotional growing. In America, we've moved into this what's called intensive parenting model. It's really being driven by two things, it appears. One is that parents are busier than they were in previous decades and generations. Secondly is that all parents now ascribe to a set of values around raising their kids, which is high inputs into the kids. So soccer practice, dance lessons, art classes, music lessons, tutoring, like whatever it is, parents are much more driven to make sure their kid is getting, as much as they can to get them on a good start. And that's not necessarily unfounded. As economic disparities do grow in this country, there's a lot of parental anxiety about their, keeping their kids, making sure they're on a successful trajectory. Some parents push back with this, kind of these laid back, laissez-faire, free range parenting styles. But I think a lot of parents feel the pressure, and it's hard not to, do those kinds of things for your kids. Make sure they've got the lessons and certainly the tutoring support and, or whatever help they need. One of the other trends that is definitely newer in terms of parenting from previous generations is the emphasis on what's called relational parenting. Parents have become much more invested in developing good, strong bonds with their kids, connections. And that wasn't necessarily the case for most parents in previous generations. It just wasn't part of the common understanding. But it's being fueled partly by neuroscience, new research in neuroscience, and also attachment research. So we do recognize now that having a strong, healthy, emotional relationship with your child in the sense of being connected to them is very helpful for your children. And it's considered what they call a protective factor. Mm-hmm. It will make it easier to weather a lot of the storms and bumpy parts of life. It can help keep your child, potentially off drugs. It can help keep your child out of mischief. Or if they get into mischief, that strong attachment and that, secure bond can help get them back on track. That is more work for parents as well. It's more work. Previous generations raised the kid, they're doing all right, off they go. It just wasn't as common knowledge or, not understood as well. So I was working with a couple that had a son. They were very frustrated with him because he was not listening to them, particularly in the morning routine. And this was a child who was really a very astute little person, just understanding a lot of things, was reading, maybe a grade above, maybe 2 grades. they were getting angry and yelling. So bringing the awareness to what's happening in the morning when they started kind of losing it, and also the reasons how come the child was not listening, like what was going on with the child in those moments. So we looked at things like, routines, developing routines, creating those routines with your child, so that the child, when you do that with your child, you're getting buy-in, just like we do in companies. When you sit down and create these routines with your child and write them out, you're going to start increasing cooperation. You're going to start seeing more of what you need and want from that child. So that's a strategy that's simple, but creating routines that parents can do, that these parents started doing, and that started working for them. The other thing is a tool called Take Time for Training. It's hard for us to understand sometimes the mindset of a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old. They don't have the same competencies that we have, and we really do forget that. We think that they know what it means to gather the dishes from the table and put them in the sink. They don't actually necessarily know what that means the way that you want it done. So you do have to take time to, in a calm manner, explain to your child what you want them to do, and show them. It's the modeling, it's doing it together. You can make it fun. So take time for training, and it's simple, but a lot of parents, we don't do it. So that's another tool that can be in your toolbox. The other really big one that's important for parents, that I needed to get this down when my kids were teens. So the hardest periods, they say, are when your kids are toddlers and then teens. In many ways, it's a similar state. They're different, but developmentally they're different, but they have parallels in that in the toddler years, a kid is starting to express their desire for autonomy. Let me do it, let me do it. Well, guess what? It's the same thing in the teen years. Let me do it, let me do it. They're really coming into their autonomy, their independence, their sovereignty. They know a lot, but they're still young, in their teen years. So you get a lot of pushback as parents. It's from them. It's very challenging to navigate those teen years. And so I know I needed to learn this, and then I saw it with this couple with their son. Their son was older than a toddler, but there's a tool. It's actually taught by Dan Siegel. He's a psychiatrist down in LA, and it's called Brain in the Palm of the Hand. It's a simple little process, but it explains a lot to us. So if you think of your hand as a brain, this is like the brain stem. The fingers are your prefrontal cortex, and this is where the center, your prefrontal cortex, has all your judgment, your moderating of emotions, your learning goes on in the prefrontal cortex, all of your executive functions, so planning, those sorts of things, time management. And then underneath is the more primitive part of the brain, which is the amygdala and the hippocampus, and those are the emotional centers, the more primitive emotional centers that protect us in times of danger. So this is also the center of fright, flight, flee, or faint, I think is what they call it. So this is where we react. These are our emotional reactions. The prefrontal cortex is what helps moderate that. So in positive discipline, we talk about when your buttons get pushed as a parent, and we often will flip our lid, right? We're angry. Everything's gotten triggered in us, our neurochemicals are, putting out stuff that's making us angry, and we are no longer accessing the prefrontal cortex, which helps us to moderate emotion. So when your lid is flipped, this is not the time to try to instruct your child in something. It is not the time to try to negotiate with your child. It is not the time to try to set a limit with your child. Take a break. And that's the lesson. It's like when lids are flipped, this is not the time to be engaging. So you can do that when things are calmer, but that's a really important lesson. And parents don't always recognize when our lids are flipped. We're not even aware. So just becoming conscious of like, oh, whoa, I just flipped my lid. So then find a way to re-regulate. So much in life is about re-regulating our emotions, coming back to a place of centeredness. And the other thing is that we're also actually modeling this for our kids. So when we're grounded and centered, so there's new research on what's called co-regulation. So in interpersonal relationships, we are co-regulating our emotional kind of feeling inside, our centeredness. We co-regulate with the people around us. If you're calm and centered, you're modeling that for your kid, but you're also actually co-regulating so that they're experiencing greater calm. When your lid is flipped, you're modeling that for your kid, and the chances are you're going to be co-regulating that with your kid. So high conflict households, this is where people's lids are flipped. Learning how to get grounded and centered, not engaging when your lid is flipped, taking a break. They call it self-soothing, so learning how to self-soothe, getting back to center. Then you can go back and you can address that issue, whatever it was. And this works with spouses also. Not a good idea to engage when both your lids are flipped. I mean, sometimes people need to do that just to kind of vent and release some energy. And sometimes that's effective. I mean, I know like my husband and I, sometimes I think, we're better now, but in the past there were just times where it's like, we were just venting. We just needed to release some energy, but we're better now. We're way better now because we've learned these skills. So co-regulation, flipping your lid, getting calmer, learning how to do that stuff is so important as a parent and in relationship. And one other thought about that, when we talk about trauma-informed parenting, people who've had a lot of trauma in their childhoods or the ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences, their more primitive centers of the brain, the amygdala, all of that, have been on heightened alert. There might be a vigilance there or a hairpin kind of reactivity to things, right? Their buttons might get punched more easily, or they might just have a vigilance with them all the time because they had to. It was protective for them. So they're more sort of, amped up just normally in terms of their kind of their own regulation, emotional regulation. That impacts, how the person who has that past trauma is impacting with other people around them. It impacts how they're relating to other people around them. If you find that you want to speak more and you want to tell people things, right? Because there's something in you that's like, no, I've got something to say, like that urge, that might be a sign to take a step back and observe yourself a little bit more. And also another teaching in positive discipline is ask, don't tell. So, I was in a bad habit of telling my teenagers what to do, and that did not work. So I had to learn the skill of asking. And when you start asking, it's fascinating what happens. Because a lot of times the person you're asking the questions, they will figure it out themselves. They will self-correct. So that's a big transition for parents. Asking, not telling. We're doing so much telling. So I think sometimes that sensation of like kind of wanting to interject or speak up or, say something, you can feel that in your body. You can notice it in your behavior. For people that are coming from more traumatic backgrounds, you might feel a sense of bereftness, a sense even of emptiness, or really shut down inside. So I think some people, it just depends kind of what happened to you, your experiences growing up and what you've learned, what was modeled for you, how you were co-regulating with the people around you. There can be, for some people, a sense of like a cliff, that like, it's just feels awful. So alone, so alienated and just alone in this work, in these struggles. And an important teaching that is not a teaching of positive discipline, but it's a couple teaching. So it's not a parenting teaching, but it's more for couple support. It's from John and Julie Gottman. They're both psychologists. John Gottman, he's been a marriage researcher for, I think, about 40 years. He's at University of Washington, I believe it is. And it's a concept called turn towards. And it's referring to the fact that partners can, be together. They could spend a whole weekend together and not have a moment of intimacy. So you're in the same house. One of you is watching TV. The other might be, be on the computer. Somebody may watch a show late at night. Somebody else may take a bath. And you can go through this whole weekend and never really touch down with each other. Like, you need to create connection with your spouse. You need to create that intimacy. And so turning towards, a lot of times when we feel at a loss with either the parenting struggles or maybe something at work, partners can get in the habit of turning away from their spouse or their partner. When you do that, you're starting to lay like tracks down for that sort of continued behavior. It creates greater distance in the relationship over time. So this idea of turning towards, you have to start turning towards each other. And it can be really hard because you make yourself vulnerable. And your partner may not know how to be there for you when you're turning towards. You're trying to turn towards, but maybe they're saying something really like stupid in the moment. So how can you turn towards them? So then you got to work through that stuff. So it's work. It's work. It's always going to be work to learn how to create better connections with your spouse, and certainly also our children. But this turning towards is a really important practice that we need to be doing with our partners. Wow, that's a good question. In my teen years, what are your biggest struggles right now? What are you not getting that you see around you? But I might want to do a lot of telling too. In my 20s, I might ask myself, what are you afraid of? What might your life be like if you don't go down this road? Because we really do come to these places, right, where we make choices and our life changes because of them. Yeah, I think probably always asking yourself, what is it that I want? What is it that I'm afraid of? What's holding me back? What can I do differently to make things better for myself and for the people around me? I think they'd be like, whoa, you did this? Are you kidding me? I would say, I had to give up some things, but I gained so much. And it isn't the things that we're taught in school to value and to treasure. Having a career is really important, and women do need to have careers, and we all need to have careers. And sometimes you might have to downshift, and that's a decision, that every family does have to make on their own, how they're going to do that, if they decide to do that. There's a lot of choices along the way that you can make, and I think, my younger self, my 20 self would just be like, I cannot believe you did this, and how did you do this? How did you do this? Yeah, and I would say I did it by keeping an open heart, keeping an open mind. I had to let go of a lot of stuff, a lot of fear, being able to tolerate your own fear, keeping your heart open to the possibilities, making yourself vulnerable, and courage.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this beautiful interview. just look in the cameras, tell them who you are,
Sure.
and where they can find you on social media.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm Lisa Krause. I'm a parent and couple educator and coach, and you can find me at mapwisdom.com.